directly through the phone, you'll see the number there. And we'll be glad to study with you. We're looking forward to in-person Bible studies while we enjoy, the communication we have across the world. There we go. Got it. Finally. All right. So if we get to this topic of Ecclesiastes, and we just watched a little video a minute ago about what the book is about and what the purpose of the book is about. And it was an 8-minute little clip by the Bible Project on YouTube. And if you watch it, anybody can tune it in and watch it. But what it does is it just gives you a brief little summation of what the book of Ecclesiastes is all about. And that's what we're going to try to do tonight, is to kind of get started and then utilize this time to get us a little further into wisdom literature. First question, I guess, would be, why would it be very important or incumbent upon us to study wisdom literature? So we would have wisdom. And Ecclesiastes, Proverbs, those two in particular. How many of you have studied the book of Ecclesiastes before? I mean, in a personal, detailed reading. I was talking to the lady who cut my hair, and I was telling her about it, and that's in the Bible? I said, yeah, you ought to. And I was telling her some of the phrases out of the book of Ecclesiastes. And she just was amazed that, that was in there. Better to go to the house of mourning than the house of feasting. And some of the challenges that it places before us in how to understand life. And we have been, in our Wednesday night class, trying to just do a life application study. How can we understand the Bible in our daily lives, and in particular with this beginning of wisdom literature? The book of Ecclesiastes is where we would start if someone was an unbeliever, because it really starts with what they believe. And this is life without God. Life without God. Now, if for just a minute, if you suspend that from your mind, then what are you left with? If you take away the spiritual element, life without God, and the spiritual element that goes with that, what's happening every day that you live?
You're getting a day older. Is that what you were going to say?
All things get old. So remember, we're trying to get perspective. And so this class is about how we're going to look at life. And one of the first observations is about the circle of life in chapter 1 and verse 4. When I had self-evident truth, nobody lives forever. In verse 3, what profit has a man in all of his labor which he toils under the sun? One generation passes away and another generation comes. The earth abides forever. And then it actually gets to the very part of the end of it. Look at verse 11. There's no remembrance of the former things. The next half of that. Nor will there be any remembrance of the things that are to come. Have I depressed you yet? Because when we read the book of Ecclesiastes, as with this visor, you're not able to look up. It ends this way in everything. In everything. And with the thought of God out of the picture, so you don't have faith, hope, and love, because you only have whatever humanitarian thought you might think would be consistent with your life. Why is this? Well, number one, it's a self-evident truth. So we acknowledge we are temporary. Now, the writer of the book of Ecclesiastes, remember you have at the beginning, you have the author, you have the author, and then you have the critic. And then you go back to the author at the end of the book. And the critic, or the teacher, is actually just analyzing everything that he sees. And this is for us, the wisdom of Solomon in everything that we see. And the question that is bearing on every one of us to have this study is, how does this help us? If all things become old, you got to take it to heart. I'm saying, when you say all things become old, I'm saying all things. Everything. How does that help us? What does it do? What does it force, I guess? Maybe that's what I'm reaching for. If I'm saying that I'm going to have a discussion with a person who is an unbeliever, an atheist, or you're just indifferent, you're just kind of uncommitted because life goes on, right? I'll fix it later. That way of life, all that way of thinking, actually acknowledging it, saying, when you look at it, you put all that work in, and who remembers? Who remembers the work that maybe our great-great-grandparents went through to either get to this country or to set up shop or to go through what they went through to lead to where we are? There will be no remembrance of the things that are to come. Chapter 1 and verse 11. And so this is a fascinating read. It's a fascinating study if you're interested in the wisdom literature, because it truly does makes you, the next question. When do we comprehend age?
When you get about 35 or a little older, you realize your life is half gone.
What? When do you comprehend? Now, I didn't say you know age. Everybody knows age. You can just look and see. Young, old. You feel. So when do you comprehend it? And I say 35 is, yes, you can begin to acknowledge you're getting older. But I think what chapter 12, and this is why this is so deep and important, because it uses the comprehension of age, and it says, the dark days come. Now, why is this so important? Huh? Not me. I'm not going to have dark days. I've just not been sick a day in my life, and I'm just going to stay this way. I'm not worried about that. Huh? Really? Why does this help us? And why does reading something that sounds so bleak, gloom, the dark days come, and you say, I have no pleasure in them? Now this is, it's written to us for us. And so we're going to take this journey on, and remember I was bragging about the transformation into the spiritual life made easy. And this is how it's made easy, is because our perception of reality is real. And the book of Ecclesiastes challenges every aspect of that. If you don't believe me, look at chapter 5. Go to look verse 10. Read that verse. Somebody just, a principle. Somebody got it? Ecclesiastes 5:10. He that loves silver will not be satisfied with silver. You get exactly what you want, and you're not satisfied. And he's giving you a principle of life. How many of y'all have ever had a new car? How many of you ever had a new car that ended up being a lemon? Huh? Then what? What happened? It went from the new car smell to the lemon smell. Life. And even if it was nice and clean and fresh and new, you either had to spend to maintain it, or you just had to say, it's just too old, I got to get something else. So in this process that we're trying to empty our minds ourselves, Ecclesiastes chapter 3, verse 12 and 13. We're shopping around a little bit on verses tonight, and then next week we may just stay in a contextual reading. But 12 and 13, I know that nothing is better for them than to rejoice and to do good in their lives, and also that every man should eat and drink and enjoy the good of all his labor. It is the gift of God. So in the book of Ecclesiastes, you never hear of God being mentioned except on a couple of occasions when he's telling us to acknowledge that life is a gift. Okay? Only time. Other than that, it's a narrative or a critic about life and what's wrong with life. Why it's not going to go the way you expect or the way you anticipate. But he gives us this little 3 in verse 12 and 13, and then you get into chapter 9. Now this is in verse 10 and 11. Get over here to it. Excuse me. There it is. Live joyfully with the wife whom you love all the days of your vain life, which he has given you under the sun, all the days of your vanity, for that is your portion in life. And in the labor which you perform under the sun. Now, catch this, because we've already said in reading chapter 5 and verse 10, whoever works and desires abundance, he gets abundance, he's not satisfied. Whoever works for silver, he gets silver, he's not satisfied. Now we go, verse 10, whatever your hand finds to do, do it with all your might. So is he contradicting himself? He's saying no matter how much money you want, the more you get, the more you want, and you're not going to be satisfied. And then he turns around and he says, whatever your hand finds to do, you do it with all your might. And if you're making silver or marketing silver, then you might have a bunch of silver. But he's saying you're not going to be satisfied with the silver. So what is he telling you to be satisfied with? This is the key to life. What's the key to life? Whatever your hand finds to do, do it with your might. For there is no, all right, we're in the grave. He's going to point you to the grave. And then he's going to point you to life. And he's going to say, this is what you do in life because you can't do it in the grave. And what is it? You got to get the book out, look at the word. Whatever your hand finds to do, do it with your might. For there is no work or device or knowledge or wisdom in the grave where you're going. What's he saying?
Enjoy the work you do.
Make application of what you got your hands on and put it to use. It's going to be very effective in what you're going to really experience. And so now we have this live, or he says, how does he express it? In the New King James, live joyfully, rejoice. Work in that text to rejoice and do good. Okay? To rejoice and to do good. So the author is wanting us to hear the preacher. And we only have a few little segments of places to find things to do. And what I mean by that is you learn a work ethic, but let me put it this way. If you worked only to receive a paycheck, and on the Friday that you got the paycheck, that was the only enjoyment that you got out of the things that you had to accomplish was getting the money. What has just happened to 36% of your life?
It's gone.
You've set yourself up for misery. You ever see people that hate their job and hate to work? I hate it. I don't want to. And guess what? You get to the New Testament, it gets a little worse. Man refuses to work, neither let him eat. These are principles of life, but they're principles of how to enjoy life. A person that is on the side of not working is always in the side of I am needy. A person here, he says, I want you to work and do good, is a person that is busy, is working and functioning to help. Now, chapter 3, go back a little bit, and break out into that song, Everything is Beautiful. How can this be? You know, we just asked a minute ago, everything gets old. Everything gets old. And, well, I'm just going to tell you the reality of it all. When it gets old, it don't get prettier. You know, as you begin to lose your physical composition, it begins to show. I'm a shell of the man I used to be. You begin to be affected physically. And you begin to realize that there's even a time to shrink. Your body is automatically going to show you that, and Ecclesiastes chapter 12 is going to actually describe it. How to get old. But what we're saying right now, as the young guys are back there, is it is in our youth. If we take this perspective and take the precepts from the Proverbs then we have become the wisest, most insightful individuals that are in the workplace. You understand what I've just said? In the workplace. Because you perceive so many things, and we're going to see all of them, but this is the one thing about how you hit the floor every morning. And it's a very valuable lesson, and it's an incredible perspective. Chapter 3, beginning in verse 1, you might remember that there was a song, if you're old, from the mamas and the papas from the late 60s and the early 70s. And it wasn't mamas and papas, it was, yeah, you corrected me on that one time before, Paul. The Birds. To everything, turn, turn, turn. You can look it up on me. To everything, there's a season and a time for every purpose under heaven. There's a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant, a time to pluck up that which is planted, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to break down and a time to build up, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance, a time to cast away stones and a time to gather stones, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing, a time to gain and a time to lose, a time to keep and a time to throw away, a time to tear and a time to sow, a time to keep silent and a time to speak, a time to love and a time to hate, a time of war and a time of peace. For what profit has the worker from what that he labors? I have seen the God-given task which the sons of men have been occupied, are to be occupied. Now, he just said, your God-given task was all of that I just read. You're going, man, I'm busy. I'm building, I'm tearing down, I'm downside, I'm building up, and then I'm downsizing, I'm busy. Verse 11. This is your life if you choose it. He has made everything beautiful in its time. And he has put eternity in their hearts, except that no one can find out the work that God does from beginning to end. Now, when he says that remember that spirit, we had a discussion in the class the other day, or in my sermon. I know that nothing is better for them than to rejoice and to do good in their lives. That's verse 12. There's nothing better than them to rejoice and to do good in their lives. Because he's made all things beautiful and the King James, I don't know if anyone else's version says his time. If anybody reading out of the King James? But the King James says instead of its time, he's made everything beautiful. And I guess my challenge question, since we are in a class, how and why? How and why are all things beautiful in his time? Yeah, this is one of those, it does take a bit to answer. It takes a little thought. 15 minutes though we got, so we're good. We got plenty of time. Look, and you experience a difficult time. Where is he? I'm right there. Why does it become beautiful when we do go through loss? Guess what? The Father of mercies and the God of all comforts visits us. Why is it better when he says in chapter 7, go to the house of mourning than to go to the house of feasting? That goes against everything I feel. And then yet here I am declaring it's beautiful. And that's the plane every time God is acknowledged of what occurs. In this life, without God, and of the Spirit or striving after the wind. Breathing hevel. That's breathing nonsense. If you want to know what that vanity is, it's kind of when you're watching the news or you're listening to someone and they are in opposition to just what's just right, what's true. And you just go, you should just breathe in and look at them and go, that's just hevel. And that's just nonsense. That's what he's saying, that life provides, when you look at it from this perspective, that you work all your life and you don't know whether a fool or a smart person will get your inheritance. And whether you build a business and you have this corporation and it's beautiful and it's served the community so well, and then some guy comes in behind it and your family isn't really interested. Or maybe you got a big business and you're got some in-law money and you decide you want to sponsor a political event that costs your corporation millions of dollars, to give a real life example of people that do foolish things and harm others. And when he says the work ethic, he says when he thought about the actual, if you look at chapter 2, he considered madness and folly and what he could do to exceed the kings in verse 12. And I saw the wisdom exceeds as light exceeds darkness. So he's starting to understand knowledge. And then he says this in verse 14, yet I myself perceived, and this is what the study is for, the same event happens to them all. And so I said in my heart, as it happens to the fool, so it happens to me. What did he just mean by that? Life in its proper perspective. That because you live godly and you do those things that are right or not foolish, he's saying that the same thing, the both of you can be at the cancer doctor together, the fool and the godly one. And the book of Ecclesiastes helps eliminate prejudice. And that's what, just happened there. But it's important to note that here is the preacher as he's giving the critique of life. And in chapter 2 and verse 17, what does he say? What happened to him all of a sudden when he lost sight of God? All of a sudden we have God telling us enjoy and excel and whatever. And then now what does he say in chapter 2 and verse 17 about things? I hate life. So these are the ways that we need to know about how to navigate how we're going to live. In other words, the reality when the reality of everything that he had worked for caught up with him, what is that? You can't take it with you. And he's going to say, as he gets into the middle of it, that, well, look at verse 23. And this will be one of the things that we actually talk about, maybe real soon. But anyway, it says, for all of his days are sorrowful and his work burdensome, and even at night his heart takes no rest. And what does he mean by that? Why is his heart not resting at night? Worrying. And we'll see that in that the more you have, guess what? He's talking about what he has, the limitations, all of a sudden. So he was in control in his mind. He had control of the circumstance in his mind. And then I perceived that it was this way. And I don't know about y'all, but the first time that happens, and well, maybe it's at 35 when you get a little older, or maybe it's 52 with a heart spasm, or 65, whatever. But anyway, without the recognition that every day is a gift of God, there is no good in them. That's how you hear the Ecclesiastes 12. I find no good in them. And then, chapter 3 and verse 12, that it says, do good and rejoice in your life. It is nothing but, chapter 3, verse 12, I know that nothing is better than for them than to rejoice and to do good in their lives. I mean, it's literally the key to enjoying life is to do things that are good, positive with your time. And so here's how it works in seeing the simple. And that's going to look like this. Look at chapter 5 and verse 12. We just had, the guy that couldn't sleep. Now look, both parties are working. Everybody's working. Everybody's getting up and going to their jobs. But there's one person here that he says, the sleep of a laboring man is sweet. You go in, you put in a good day's labor, you move a handful of, you move a lot of furniture that day, whatever it is, a hard day's work ends up being, we'll sleep good tonight. And then we just read, the guy that we think is got it all, maybe he's on top of the pile by our perception. Guess what? Even at night, his heart has no rest. And so we get to the end of the class and we say this. What do you want most out of life? Now remember that Bob Owen started this class on Ecclesiastes a million years ago with the question, what do you want?
Serenity.
I just want to be happy. Now, any of us, serenity, that peace, that happiness. I just want to be happy. So what's the problem with that? What we perceive that will make us happy will not make us happy. If I think that silver is making me happy, I get busy to get more silver. And guess what? I'm not any more happy. Guess what I want? More silver.
I've read about what they call situational happiness. If I do this, then I'm going to be happy.
The carrot.
Turn that way. Well, okay, if I do that instead, once I get to this point, then I'll be happy. Everything is situational. Whenever you're constantly taking.
That is the idea, and we all go through it, especially when we're younger and we live in the U.S. of A. And I've told the story about, hitting that age where, you could ride a bicycle and, you really didn't have one, but like let me down and small. And then you find one of them high handlebar banana seat rides, and and you're about 9 years old, and you go, Dad, if you get me that bicycle, I'll never want another thing. And you believe it. If I could just get that bicycle, then I'd be happy. And then I turned 10, and the bike's not new anymore, and you start scratching your head and go, if only I had a motorcycle. And such life is. And I don't think I got off that train until about 55. Well, maybe I'm still on it out there. I don't know. So finally, let's wrap up. Does God intend for you to enjoy your life?
Yes.
There you go. That's where we find our invitation to all of our neighbors to search the wisdom of God. Take a pen, take a piece of paper, write some things down, because this study, if we will permit it, will give us the rhythm to that abundant life, where we can say He has made all things beautiful in His time. And that means we're going through a time where things are getting plucked up, where there's things that are being cast away, and we wonder, what are we going to do? Well, it's part of life. And when we look at it through the eternal perspective, we can kind of learn that the outward man perishing, the inward man being renewed day by day. Thanks. We're going to break it there, and got a couple of songs and prayer. Go.